My name is Nathaniel Covington, and I am 73 years old. For my birthday, my daughter gave me a cheap sweater and a single soul-crushing sentence. She looked me right in the eye and said, "You're a burden, Dad." That same night, she and her husband told me I would be moved to the basement and that my late wife's most precious memories would be thrown out with the trash, so I quietly packed a bag and walked out. Before my head hit the pillow in a cheap hotel room, I made a single phone call. Their $25,000 first-class vacation to Hawaii vanished into thin air. But what they didn't know, and what I was just beginning to realize myself, was that this was only the beginning. Before I continue my story, I would love to know how far it has traveled. Please tell me in the comments where you are listening from. And if you believe that respect for our elders is one of the most important values a family can have, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. The silence in my daughter's house was the first thing you noticed. It was a heavy, expensive silence, the kind that fills rooms with minimalist furniture and ceilings that are just a little too high. It was my 73rd birthday, and I was sitting in a leather armchair that felt more like a display piece than a place for a man to rest. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the garden, a perfectly manicured landscape of stone and carefully chosen plants. I designed that garden myself 2 years ago, a housewarming gift for my daughter Brianna and her husband Todd. Now it felt as cold and foreign as they did. Their laughter echoed from the kitchen, sharp and brittle. They were looking at something on Todd's phone, their heads close together. For the last hour, they had talked about Todd's job, their new neighbors, and most of all, their upcoming trip to Hawaii. "Did you get the confirmation from the resort, Todd?" Brianna's voice was high and excited. "I want to make sure they got our request for the oceanfront suite." "Already handled, babe," Todd said, his voice smooth with satisfaction. "First class all the way. Only the best for my girl." I took a slow sip of water. There was a dull ache in my chest, a familiar reminder of why I was here in the first place. 2 years ago, a heart attack had put me in the hospital for a week. When I was discharged, Brianna had insisted I couldn't live alone anymore. "Sell the house, Dad," she had said, her voice dripping with a concern I now recognized as false. "Come live with us. We'll take care of you. Just put the money from the sale into an account we can manage so you don't have to worry about a thing." I had trusted her. I sold the home my late wife Amelia and I had built together, the place where every floorboard held a memory. I handed the savings of a lifetime over to my only child. It was the single greatest mistake of my life. "Grandpa," a gentle voice pulled me from my thoughts. My grandson Leo stood before me holding out a glass of cool water. He was only 16, but his eyes held a depth that reminded me so much of his grandmother. He was the only piece of Amelia I had left. "Thank you, Leo," I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my lips. "Why aren't you with your parents?" Leo shrugged, glancing towards the kitchen. "They're busy, planning." He sat on the rug at my feet. "Are you okay? It's your birthday." I rested my hand on his shoulder, a wave of affection washing over me. "I'm okay as long as you're here." We sat in a comfortable silence for a moment. I asked him about school, about the basketball team, about his dreams. He told me he wanted to be an architect, and for the first time all day, my heart felt warm. "Leo, leave your grandfather alone." Brianna's voice cut through our quiet moment. "He needs his rest. Don't bother him." Leo lowered his head, mumbled an apology, and shuffled back towards the kitchen. I watched him go, and the ache in my chest returned sharper this time. It wasn't my heart. It was my soul. I am an engineer. I spent my life building bridges, structures meant to connect people to withstand any storm, but I had failed to see the crumbling foundation of my own family. After a dinner of expensive takeout served on fancy plates, it was time for presents. I told myself not to expect much, but a small, foolish part of me still held on to hope. Brianna handed me a clumsily wrapped box. "Happy birthday, Dad." I opened it. Inside was a beige acrylic sweater. It felt rough to the touch and had the faint chemical smell of a factory, the kind of thing you'd find in a bargain bin. I held it up against my shoulders. It was at least one size too small. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, forcing my lips into a smile. "It's very practical." Todd let out a short, barking laugh. "At least it'll keep you warm while you're sitting around watching TV all day. That's about all you do anyway, right?" The air in the room grew thick. I looked Todd directly in the eye. "I may be retired, Todd, but I'm not a piece of furniture. I spent 45 years designing the bridges you drive over every single day. I believe that's earned me a little respect." My quiet defiance ignited Brianna's anger. "Dad, Todd was just joking. Why do you always have to be so sensitive?" "This isn't about being sensitive, Brianna. It's about dignity," I said, my voice steady. "Something that money can't buy. Dignity." She scoffed, rising to her feet. "You want to talk about dignity? Do you have any idea how exhausting and expensive it is to take care of an elderly parent? The medication, the doctor's appointments, not to mention the fact that we have no privacy." I was stunned into silence. "I have never asked for anything," I finally said. "The money from my house was more than enough to cover all of my expenses with plenty left over." "Oh, so it is about the money," she spat, her voice turning ugly. "I knew it. It's always about the money. You have no idea. You just sit here all day, a real burden. We need a life, too. This trip to Hawaii is the only thing keeping us from going insane." Burden. The word hung in the air between us, sharp and jagged. It hit me harder than any physical blow. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, looked at me and saw a weight, a problem, a burden. Todd, sensing his advantage, moved in for the final blow. "Look, Nate," he said, using my first name to strip away any remaining respect. "We've made a decision. We need more space. We're finally going to build that home gym we've always wanted. And your room is the perfect spot." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process his words. "My room." Brianna nodded, refusing to meet my eyes. "We'll move you down to the room in the basement. It's a little small, but there's enough space for a bed. We'll get it cleared out this weekend." The basement, where they kept old furniture and holiday decorations, where things were stored and forgotten. But the final, unthinkable cruelty was yet to come. "And all of Mom's old boxes," Brianna added, her voice completely detached. "The photos, the old clothes, her books. They take up so much space. It's time to get rid of it all. We'll have a charity service come pick it up." That was it. The breaking point. They weren't just erasing me, they were erasing Amelia, the love of my life. Her memory was all I had left, and the thought of strangers pawing through her things, hauling them away like trash. A cold, pure rage rose within me. It was so powerful it extinguished all the pain and disappointment. All that was left was a terrible, unwavering clarity. I said nothing. I simply stood up. Brianna and Todd seemed surprised by my silence. They probably expected me to yell, to plead, to break down. But the man they were looking at was not a weak old father. The engineer inside me had taken over. A problem had been identified. The stress points had been calculated. It was now time to design a solution. I turned and walked to my room. Each step was deliberate and firm. I did not look back, but I could feel Leo's eyes on me, filled with confusion and hurt. Inside my room, I pulled a small duffel bag from the closet. I packed only the essentials, a few changes of clothes, my laptop and chargers, and a small carved wooden box containing the last letters Amelia ever wrote to me. 15 minutes later, I walked out of the room. Brianna and Todd were waiting in the hallway, smug looks on their faces. "See, Dad," Brianna said. "It'll be better this way." I walked past them without a word and headed straight for the front door. I could hear Todd chuckle behind me. "Just let him go. He'll be back. Where else is he gonna go?" As the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, a surprising sense of freedom washed over me. He was wrong. I knew exactly where I was going, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The hotel room was aggressively beige. The walls, the carpet, the curtains all seemed designed to have no personality at all. It was a place for people in between destinations, a temporary box that held no memories and made no promises. It was perfect. I placed my small duffel bag on the luggage rack and surveyed the space. One bed neatly made, one desk empty except for a lamp, one window looking out onto a parking lot. There was no trace of my daughter's opulent, sterile mansion. There was no ghost of my wife's laughter in the hallways. Here, there was only me, the silence and the task ahead. I did not feel sadness. The time for that had passed somewhere on the 10-minute drive here. The word burden had acted like a chemical agent, crystallizing my grief and disappointment into something hard, clear, and cold. Anger. But it was not a hot, reckless anger. It was the anger of an engineer who has discovered a fatal flaw in his own design, a structural failure that threatened to bring the entire bridge crashing down. For 2 years I had ignored the warning signs, the hairline cracks in my daughter's affection, the subtle corrosion in her husband's respect. I had patched them over with excuses, telling myself it was stress or a generational difference. I was wrong. These were not minor flaws. They were evidence of a complete catastrophic failure in the foundation. And when an engineer finds a failure that severe, he does not patch it. He condemns the structure and prepares for a controlled demolition. I sat down at the small desk, the chair protesting with a slight squeak. I opened my laptop. The familiar glow of the screen filled the dim room. My fingers, steady and sure, typed in a series of complex passwords. Passwords I hadn't used myself in over 2 years. Passwords I had given to Brianna, trusting she would be a faithful steward of the legacy I had built with Amelia. The main portal for my financial life loaded onto the screen. It was all there. Checking accounts, savings, investment portfolios, retirement funds. It was a blueprint of my life's work, a testament to 45 years of rising before the sun, of meticulous calculations, of sacrificing small pleasures for long-term security. For a moment I saw Amelia's face, her warm smile, as we sat at our own kitchen table decades ago, sketching out our financial future on a yellow legal pad. "We have to be smart about this, Nate," she had said, her voice full of love and determination. "We have to build something that will last, something that will take care of us and our family no matter what." We did it together. Every decision, every investment was a shared dream. Now I was looking at that dream through the lens of betrayal. I began my work. I opened the primary checking account, the one from which the household bills were paid. My methodical mind took over. I downloaded the last 24 months of statements. I opened a spreadsheet, my fingers moving across the keyboard with an old familiar rhythm. I started inputting data, categorizing expenses. The numbers began to tell a story of incredible waste and entitlement. Hundreds of dollars for dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, thousands on clothes from boutiques I'd never seen, charges for spa days, golf club fees, weekend getaways. My money. Amelia's money was being bled dry to fund a lifestyle of careless luxury for my daughter and her parasitic husband. Each transaction was a small sting, another crack appearing in the facade. But I did not allow emotion to cloud my judgment. I was simply gathering data, assessing the scale of the damage. I moved from the checking account to the credit card statements. The primary card was in my name, with Brianna listed as an authorized user. I had given it to her for emergencies, for household necessities. But as I scrolled through the endless list of charges, I saw that my definition of necessity and hers were worlds apart. High-end electronics, designer handbags. And then I saw it. The charge that made the cold anger in my veins begin to simmer. A single transaction posted just last week. $25,347. The vendor, Aloha Dream Vacations. First-class tickets. A 5-star resort. The final insult purchased with my life savings while I was being called a burden in my own home. I leaned back in the chair, the squeak echoing in the silent room. The data was collected. The analysis was complete. The conclusion was undeniable. The structure was rotten to the core. It had to come down. My mind was now clear, the path forward illuminated by the harsh glare of the spreadsheet on my screen. I was no longer a grieving father. I was no longer a burden. I was Nathaniel Covington, the engineer. And I was about to remind my daughter what happens when you try to build a life on a foundation of lies. You lose everything when the man who designed the original blueprint decides to tear it down. The first light of dawn was just beginning to filter through the thin hotel curtains, painting the beige room in shades of gray. I had not slept. Sleep was a luxury I could not afford. Instead, I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, the numbers and figures from my laptop burned into my mind. The rage had subsided, replaced by a profound and chilling sense of purpose. My daughter and her husband thought they had pushed an old man into a corner. They had no idea they had just awakened the engineer. As soon as the clock on my phone showed 7 a.m., I made my first call. It was to Robert McMillan, my financial advisor for over 30 years. He was more than an advisor. He was a friend. We had seen each other through market crashes and booms, through the birth of our children, and through the loss of our wives. His voice was thick with sleep when he answered. "Nate, is everything all right?" he asked, the concern immediate. "I'm fine, Robert. I apologize for the early call," I said, my voice even and calm. I need you to do something for me. I need you to pull up the founding documents for the Covington Family Trust. Specifically, I need you to review Section 4, Paragraph B regarding the duties and limitations of the designated trustee. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him sitting up suddenly, wide awake. Brianna, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I confirmed. I also need a complete transaction history for all accounts linked to the trust for the past 24 months. And I need you to be available later today. I'll be in touch with instructions. Whatever you need, Nate, he said, his voice now firm. I've had my concerns for a while. I'm glad you're looking into it. We hung up. His validation, though small, was a comfort. It meant I wasn't just an old man reacting out of hurt feelings. I was a man seeing a problem that others had noticed as well. The next step was more difficult. I needed a weapon. I needed a lawyer. I didn't want the old family lawyer who had handled our wills. He was too familiar, too soft. I needed someone sharp, someone who understood the precise and brutal language of financial and trust law. I opened my laptop again and began to search. I wasn't looking for the biggest firm. I was looking for the best mind. My search led me to a name, Evelyn Reed. She was a partner at a smaller, highly respected firm. There were articles written about her detailing complex cases she had won against much larger opponents. She was described as meticulous and relentless. A photograph showed a woman in her mid-30s, her expression intelligent and serious. She was exactly what I needed. I dialed the number for her office, my heart beating a little faster. This was the point of no return. The receptionist answered, and I asked to speak with Ms. Reed directly. I'm sorry, sir, but Ms. Reed's schedule is fully booked today. Can I take a message? Please tell her that Nathaniel Covington is calling, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Tell her it concerns a breach of fiduciary duty regarding the Covington Family Trust document number 724 Alpha. Tell her I have already compiled a full preliminary financial analysis and I require a consultation before noon today. I am prepared to pay for any scheduling changes this may cause. The receptionist was silent for a moment. I knew the language I was using, breach of fiduciary duty. The specific, though made-up document number would act as a signal. It told her this was not a casual inquiry. This was serious business. Please hold, Mr. Covington, she said, her tone completely changed. Less than a minute later, a new voice came on the line. It was calm, clear, and confident. This is Evelyn Reed. You have my attention, Mr. Covington. I took a breath. Thank you for taking my call, Ms. Reed. As I told your assistant, I have a sensitive and urgent matter. My daughter is the acting trustee for a significant family trust I established with my late wife. I have concrete evidence that she has been misusing the funds for personal enrichment far beyond the scope of her duties. What kind of evidence? She asked, her voice cutting straight to the point. Credit card statements showing over $25,000 spent on a personal vacation. Unauthorized investment activities conducted by her husband using trust funds. A consistent pattern of extravagant personal spending disguised as household expenses. I have downloaded and organized the statements for the past 2 years. There was another pause, but this one was different. It was the sound of a professional mind processing information, calculating angles. Where are you now, Mr. Covington? I am at a hotel downtown, I replied. My 9 a.m. appointment just canceled, she said. Can you be at my office in 30 minutes? I looked at the small wooden box on the nightstand, the one containing Amelia's letters. I felt a surge of strength. I was not just doing this for myself. I was doing this to protect the legacy she had worked so hard to build alongside me. I'll be there in 20, I said, and hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city waking up below. For 2 years, I had allowed myself to feel old, to feel weak, to feel like a passenger in my own life. But in the span of a few hours, something had shifted. The numbers, the evidence, the cold, hard facts they had given me back my purpose. My daughter thought I was a burden she could cast aside. She was about to find out that this burden was the man who had built the entire world she was living in, and he was now ready to take it all back. After hanging up with Ms. Reed's office, I felt a surge of energy, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I had a mission. I had a destination, and now I had 30 minutes to prepare. The engineer in me took over once more. A plan is only as good as the materials you bring to the construction site. My materials were the cold, hard facts, and I needed to present them perfectly. I turned back to my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I opened the folders containing the financial statements I had downloaded during the night. I began the meticulous process of printing. I couldn't use the printer in the hotel lobby. This was too sensitive for prying eyes. I had an old portable printer in my bag, a tool I used to carry to job sites. I plugged it in, and the small machine whirred to life. One by one, the pages began to emerge. Each one felt heavy with significance. Here was a statement showing $3,000 spent at a luxury spa. Amelia had loved simple massages for her arthritis, but she would have been horrified by that kind of extravagance. Here was another detailing a series of cash withdrawals from ATMs near a casino, all made by Todd. I remembered him telling me he was at a business conference that weekend. Page after page slid out of the printer, each one a testament to their lies. The stack of paper on the small desk grew higher. It was a physical monument to their disrespect. I didn't just print them. I organized them. I used the hotel's complimentary paper clips to fasten each month's statements together. I took a pen and circled the most outrageous charges in red ink. The $25,000 vacation package, a $1,200 handbag for Brianna, a lease payment for a sports car I had never even seen. The engineer in me demanded order precision. I was not going into that meeting as a rambling, emotional old man. I was going in as a client with an airtight case, documented and undeniable. As I worked, I thought about the life Amelia and I had built. We never denied ourselves comfort, but we valued security and integrity above all else. We drove the same reliable car for 10 years. We took simple, beautiful vacations to national parks. We saved, we invested, we planned. We built a small, strong fortress of a life designed to protect us and our family from the storms of the world. And now I saw with sickening clarity that my own daughter and her husband had been looting that fortress from the inside, tearing out the copper wiring and selling the foundation stones to pay for cheap trinkets. Finally, my work was done. A thick, perfectly organized stack of documents sat on the desk. The first rays of the morning sun were now streaming through the window, cutting through the dimness of the room. I stood up, my back stiff from sitting for so long. I walked into the small bathroom to splash some water on my face and straighten my collar before leaving. As I looked up, I caught my own reflection in the mirror. For a moment, I just stared. In the harsh fluorescent light, I saw the lines on my face, the gray in my hair. But something was different. For the past 2 years, when I had looked in the mirror, I had seen a man who was fading. A man whose shoulders were slumped by grief and a quiet sense of defeat. A widower, a retiree, a burden. But the man looking back at me now was not that person. The eyes were the same, but the light within them had changed. The sadness was gone, burned away by the righteous fire of purpose. I saw the sharp, analytical gaze of the engineer I once was. I saw the unyielding strength of a husband protecting his wife's legacy. I saw a man who had been pushed too far and had decided to push back. I stood up a little straighter. I squared my shoulders. My name is Nathaniel Covington, I thought to myself. And I am done being quiet. I am done being pushed aside. I picked up my briefcase, the weight of the evidence inside feeling less like a burden and more like a weapon. Then I walked out of the room and into the morning light, ready for the battle to begin. The law office of Reed & Associates was on the 14th floor of a modern glass and steel building downtown. The lobby was a study in quiet, expensive taste. Polished concrete floors, modern art on the walls, and a view that stretched across the entire city. It was a place designed to communicate power and precision. For the first time since leaving my daughter's house, I felt like I was on solid ground. This was a world I understood. A world of rules, structures, and consequences. The receptionist led me to a corner office with a panoramic view. A moment later, Evelyn Reed walked in. She was just as she appeared in her photograph, sharp-focused and radiating an intelligence that was almost a physical presence. She was wearing a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, and her handshake was firm. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Mr. Covington," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "Thank you for coming in. You said on the phone you had evidence." I nodded. I placed my briefcase on the large mahogany desk, clicked open the latches, and turned it to face her. Inside, she could see the neatly organized stack of documents, the red circles highlighting the betrayals. "I believe you'll find everything in order," I said. "I've organized it chronologically." She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of professional appreciation in her eyes. For the next 10 minutes, she was completely silent, her sharp eyes scanning page after page. I watched her as she worked, She was like a master craftsman examining a flawed structure, instantly spotting the weak points, the stress fractures, the deviations from the original design. She occasionally made a small note on a legal pad, her pen moving with swift efficiency. Finally, she looked up from the papers and then looked at me, really looked at me. "Mr. Covington," she began, her voice calm and measured, "this is not just mismanagement. Based on what I'm seeing here, this is a flagrant and sustained breach of fiduciary duty. Your daughter has been treating this trust fund like her personal ATM." She then picked up the thickest document, the one detailing the creation of the Covington Family Trust. "The good news," she said, tapping a specific paragraph with her pen, "is that you and your wife had excellent legal counsel when you created this. The language is ironclad. You are the sole grantor and primary beneficiary. Your daughter, as trustee, has a legal obligation to act in your best interest and your best interest only. She has failed that obligation on every conceivable level. Legally, you are in a position of incredible strength." Hearing those words was like a steel beam being locked into place in my soul. I was not just an angry father. I was a man who had been legally wronged, and I had the power to set it right. "So what do we do now?" I asked. A small grim smile touched Ms. Reed's lips. "Now," she said, "we stop the bleeding. We take back control. I'm going to advise you to make 3 phone calls right now from this office. My paralegal will act as a witness to each call." She slid her desk phone over to me. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. This was it. The first swing of the hammer. The first call was to the travel agency. A cheerful young woman answered. I gave her my name and the last 4 digits of my credit card. "I'm calling about a charge on my account for $25,347. I said, my voice as level as a concrete floor. "I did not authorize this charge. I am disputing it, and I want the associated booking to be canceled immediately, effective now." And there was some clicking on the other end, some talk of cancellation policies. I simply repeated, "The charge was unauthorized. I am the primary card holder. Cancel the booking or my next call will be to the fraud department. The choice is yours." The cheerful tone vanished. A few moments later, she came back on the line. "Sir, the booking has been canceled. A full refund will be issued to your card within 5 business days." One domino down. The second call was to the bank. I navigated the automated menu and finally got through to a human being in the security department. "My name is Nathaniel Covington," I said. "I would like to report my credit and debit cards as lost and stolen. All of them. I need you to deactivate them immediately and issue new ones to a secure address I will provide." I answered a series of security questions confirming my identity with information only I would know. And, I added, "I want to place a temporary freeze on all large-scale electronic transfers from any account associated with my name pending verbal confirmation from me using a passcode I am about to set." The representative efficiently processed my requests. "Okay, Mr. Covington," he said after a few minutes. "All cards have been deactivated. The freeze is in place. No one can access your funds without your direct authorization." 2 dominoes down. The final call was to my financial advisor, Robert. He answered on the first ring. "Nate, I have the documents ready." "Thank you, Robert," I said. "I am here with my new legal counsel, Ms. Evelyn Reed. On her advice, I am instructing you to execute Emergency Protocol 7 as we discussed years ago. I want you to immediately begin the process of liquidating all non-essential assets within the Covington Family Trust and transfer the funds to the new holding account we are about to create. I want my daughter Brianna's access as trustee to be suspended effective immediately pending a full legal review. Is that understood?" There was a deep sigh of what sounded like relief on Robert's end. "Understood, Nate. I'll get it done. The paperwork is already on my desk. It's about time." When I placed the receiver back in its cradle, a profound silence filled the office. I had done it. In the span of 15 minutes, I had cut the power, locked the gates, and seized control of the fortress. A wave of exhaustion and exhilaration washed over me. Ms. Reed looked at me, her expression one of pure professional respect. "Well done, Mr. Covington," she said. "That was the easy part. Now we prepare for the storm. My office will draft a formal letter to your daughter and her husband notifying them of your actions and demanding a full accounting of the trust. They will receive it tomorrow." I nodded, feeling a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. I stood up, my body feeling lighter than it had in a long time. I shook Ms. Reed's hand. Thank you, I said. As I walked out of her office and into the bright afternoon sun, I knew that my daughter's comfortable, careless world was about to be turned completely upside down. The phone call was coming. It was only a matter of time, and for the first time I felt ready for it. I was no longer a burden. I was a force of nature. And the storm had just begun. I did not have to wait long. I had returned to the hotel, the beige room, now feeling less like a box and more like a command center. I had ordered a simple cup of black tea and was sitting by the window watching the afternoon traffic flow like a river of steel and glass below. I was calm. For the first time in 2 years, the constant low-level hum of anxiety in my chest was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, steady certainty. When my phone began to buzz against the tabletop, I did not jump. I looked at the screen. The name displayed was Brianna. I let it ring 3 times, a small act of reclaiming my own time. Then I took a slow sip of my tea, placed the cup down, and answered the call. I did not say anything. I simply waited. "Dad." Her voice was a shriek, a discordant jumble of panic and fury. "What is going on? What did you do?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, my expression unchanged. "I'm not sure I understand the question, Brianna." "Don't play dumb with me," she screamed, and I could hear the sound of her pacing, the sharp click of her heels on their hardwood floors. "The airline sent an email. An email, Dad. It says our entire Hawaii trip has been canceled, the tickets, the resort, everything, and I just tried to buy groceries and my card was declined. Declined in front of everyone. You have to call them, you have to fix this right now." She finally paused to take a breath, and into that small gap of silence I inserted my reply. My voice was quiet, almost gentle. "No," I said. The silence on her end was immediate and profound. It was as if she had run full speed into a brick wall. What do you mean, no?" she stammered, the anger in her voice momentarily replaced by genuine confusion. "I mean, no," I repeated, enunciating each syllable with care. "I will not be calling anyone. I will not be fixing anything." "But why?" The question was a child's question, full of a naive disbelief that the world was not bending to her will. "It's your account. It must be some kind of mistake, some fraud alert." "There is no mistake, Brianna," I said. "And the only fraud was the belief that you could treat me like a piece of old furniture while spending my money like a queen. The account holder has simply made some necessary security adjustments to protect his assets." I could hear her mind racing, trying to catch up. She was used to me being compliant, to me smoothing over problems. This cold, detached stranger on the phone was someone she did not recognize. Her confusion quickly curdled back into rage. "Protect your assets from who? From me, your own daughter," she yelled. "After everything I've done for you, taking you in, managing your whole life for you because you couldn't do it yourself." The words, which would have wounded me deeply just 24 hours ago, now felt completely hollow. They were the desperate arguments of a parasite whose host had just cut off the blood supply. "You didn't take me in, Brianna," I said, my voice still dangerously calm. "You moved a source of income into your house. You didn't manage my life. You plundered it. There's a difference." I heard a man's voice in the background. It was Todd whispering angrily to her. Then Brianna came back on the line, her tone shifting into a kind of threatening hiss. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Dad, but you need to stop it. You need us. Where did you even go? Are you sitting in some park? You'll come crawling back by tonight. You have no one else." It was a fatal miscalculation on her part. She thought my weakness was loneliness. She had no idea that my greatest strength was now my solitude. "That's where you are mistaken," I said, and for the first time I let a hint of the steel in my soul enter my voice. "The man you kicked out of your house last night is not the man you are speaking to today. You saw a burden, but a burden by definition is a weight, and I am simply reminding you what it feels like when that weight is lifted. It feels light, doesn't it? Suddenly you are responsible for yourself." She was speechless. The threats, the anger, the demands, they had all shattered against the wall of my resolve. "You were right about one thing yesterday, Brianna," I continued, preparing to end the conversation, to make the final decisive cut. "You said you needed to have your own life, and your new life starts today. I suggest you learn how to budget." "Dad, wait," she shrieked, the panic returning full force. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said. And with that, I pressed the red icon on the screen, ending the call. The silence that filled the hotel room was absolute. It was the silence of a battle won, the silence of a bridge once thought to be impassable, now crossed. The first domino had fallen, and it had fallen exactly as the engineer had planned. The silence in my hotel room was a stark contrast to the chaos I knew had just erupted in my daughter's house. I could almost picture it. Brianna standing in the middle of her pristine white living room, staring at the silent screen of her smartphone. The phone in her hand, usually a symbol of her connection and power, was now just a useless piece of glass and metal. Her face, which she spent so much time and my money to keep smooth and serene, would be twisted in a mask of disbelief and fury. Todd would have been nearby, probably pouring himself a drink from the crystal decanter on their marble-topped bar. He would have heard the shriek of her voice and the frantic one-sided conversation. He would have approached her with that smooth, condescending confidence he always wore like a cheap suit. "What's wrong, babe?" he would have asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Did the old man finally have his little tantrum? "He hung up on me, Todd," she would have stammered, her voice trembling. He said no. He said he did it on purpose. The trip, the cards, everything." Todd would have let out a short, dismissive laugh. "He's bluffing. It's a power trip. He's a lonely old man trying to get some attention. He'll have to turn the cards back on eventually. He can't even pay for his own hotel room without them." His arrogance would have been their downfall. "Go on, try to log into the main account," he would have urged her. "I'll bet you anything it's just the credit cards he messed with. The real money is still there. He's not smart enough to figure out how to lock us out of the trust." I can see them now, sitting side by side on their $1,000 sofa, their two expensive laptops open. Two generals trying to fight a war, not realizing their supply lines had been completely severed. Brianna would have typed in the familiar password to the online banking portal. Her hands would have been shaking slightly. The page would load, and then the numbers on the screen would have told the story. The balance of the primary trust account, which just yesterday held a fortune, would now show a paltry sum. A few $100s perhaps, just enough to cover any outstanding checks. The rest would be gone. Vanished into an account they couldn't see, couldn't touch, couldn't even imagine. "What is this?" Brianna would whisper, her voice barely audible. "Where is it? Where's the money?" Todd would have leaned closer, his own face draining of color. He'd snatch the laptop from her, clicking furiously, refreshing the page as if that would magically make the numbers reappear. "This is impossible," he'd say, his voice tight with panic. "It can't be gone. He doesn't know how to do this." Next, they would have tried the investment portfolio. They would log in only to be met with a bright red banner across the top of the screen. "Access to this account has been temporarily suspended by the primary grantor. Please contact your financial administrator." The reality would crash down upon them then with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a bluff. It wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated, precise, and devastatingly effective attack. They were cut off, completely. The fear would have come first, a cold, sickening wave. Their entire lifestyle, the mortgage on their oversized house, the leases on their luxury cars, the tuition for Leo's private school was funded by that account. Their own salaries were a drop in the bucket, barely enough to cover their extravagant monthly spending. And right after the fear, the blame would begin. "What did you say to him?" Todd would have snarled, turning on her. "You must have said something to push him over the edge. I told you to handle him carefully." "Me?" Brianna would have shrieked back, her voice rising with hysteria. "You were the one calling him a freeloader. You were the one who wanted his room for a gym. This is your fault, you and your stupid greedy ideas." "My greedy ideas paid for that designer watch on your wrist," he would have yelled, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You were happy enough to spend the money when it was flowing, weren't you?" The beautiful minimalist house would have become a pressure cooker of their own making. The expensive art on the walls would seem to mock them. The floor-to-ceiling windows would feel like the bars of a cage. For years they had lived under the comfortable illusion that they were the ones in control, that the old man in the spare room was a dependent, a harmless resource to be managed. Now, in the terrifying silence of their financial ruin, they would finally understand the truth. They were not the masters of the house. They were children who had been playing with their father's checkbook, and their father had just taken it away. The pillar that had been holding up their entire world had been kicked out from under them, and they were in free fall. The next day I knew they would come for me. Anger and panic are powerful motivators. I chose to wait for them not in the privacy of my room, but in the open lobby of the hotel. I sat in a comfortable armchair with a copy of the morning newspaper and a fresh cup of coffee. The lobby was a quiet, transient space with a few business travelers typing on laptops and a family checking out at the front desk. It was a place of polite, civilized behavior, a perfect stage for the spectacle I knew was about to unfold. I wanted witnesses. I didn't have to wait long. The glass doors of the hotel entrance flew open with such force that they banged against their stoppers. And there they were, Brianna and Todd. They looked like they had been dragged through a storm. Brianna's expensive hairstyle was a mess, her eyes were red-rimmed and wild. Todd's usually confident swagger was gone, replaced by a tense, desperate energy. They scanned the lobby, their eyes locking onto me. And then they advanced. They didn't walk. They marched. Other guests looked up from their phones, startled by the raw aggression radiating from them. Brianna got to me first, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. "How dare you!" she hissed, her voice loud enough to carry across the polished marble floor. "How dare you sit here drinking coffee like you haven't just destroyed our lives?" I slowly folded my newspaper and placed it on the small table beside me. I looked up at her, my expression calm. "Good morning, Brianna. This is not the time or the place for this conversation." "Don't you talk to me about time and place," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You turned off our money. All of it. Do you have any idea what you've done? We have a mortgage to pay. Bill's Leo's tuition." "Yes," I said simply. "I am aware of those expenses. I have been aware of them for years, as I have been the one paying for them." My calmness seemed to fuel her rage. It was like throwing water on a grease fire. Todd stepped forward, trying to play the role of the reasonable man. "Look, Nate," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his panicked eyes. "Let's all just calm down. There's obviously been a huge misunderstanding. You're upset, we get it. But you can't just cut us off. It's not right. It's not legal." "Oh, I can assure you it is perfectly legal," I replied, taking a slow sip of my coffee. My lawyer, Ms. Reed, was very clear on that point. "The actions I have taken are well within my rights as the grantor of the trust you have been abusing." The mention of a lawyer sent a visible shockwave through both of them. Their faces paled. This was no longer just a family squabble. This was something far more serious. "Lawyer," Brianna whispered, her voice trembling. "You hired a lawyer against your own family." "I hired a lawyer to protect my family's legacy," I corrected her gently, "from those who would see it destroyed." That was when she truly lost control. All pretense of civility vanished. "You old fool!" she screamed, and the last few heads that hadn't already turned in our direction now snapped towards us. "You are nothing without us. You would be rotting in some state-run nursing home if it weren't for me. I am your daughter. You owe me. You owe us." A young woman at the front desk picked up her phone, her eyes wide. A hotel manager began to walk briskly towards us. "Brianna, you are creating a scene," I said, my voice still low. "I suggest you leave." "We're not leaving until you fix this," Todd snarled, his reasonable man mask completely gone. He took a step closer, his posture menacing. "You are going to get on the phone and you are going to turn everything back on right now." The manager, a neatly dressed man with a name tag that read David, arrived at our table. "Sir, ma'am, is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. "This is none of your business," Brianna snapped at him. "This is a private family matter." "I understand that, ma'am," the manager said, his professionalism unwavering. "However, you are disturbing our other guests. I must ask you to please lower your voices or I will have to ask you to leave the premises." The threat of being thrown out was the final humiliation. Brianna's face turned a shade of crimson I had never seen before. "Do you know who I am?" she sputtered, a pathetic attempt to reclaim some authority. "My father is a guest here, and we value all of our guests' peace and security," the manager said smoothly, his eyes flicking for a moment to someone behind them. "Which is why I must insist." Two uniformed security guards had appeared. They were large men, but their expressions were neutral, their movements calm and professional. They stood on either side of Brianna and Todd. They didn't touch them. They just stood there, their presence an undeniable statement. One of the guards spoke, his voice deep and respectful, but utterly inflexible. "Sir, ma'am, we need you to come with us, please." The fight completely drained out of them. They were defeated. In their own minds, they were powerful people, but in this quiet hotel lobby, under the calm gaze of the staff and the curious stares of strangers, they were just a public nuisance. Mortification washed over their faces. Todd couldn't even look at me. Brianna shot me a look of pure, venomous hatred, a look I will never forget. They turned and allowed themselves to be escorted towards the exit. They who had kicked me out of their home were now being unceremoniously kicked out of a hotel lobby. I watched them go. I didn't smile. I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I only felt a deep, profound sadness for what had been lost and a grim satisfaction that I was finally doing what was necessary. The manager walked back over to my table. "I am so sorry for that disturbance, Mr. Covington," he said. I looked up at him and gave him a small, tired smile. "You handled it perfectly, David," I said. "Thank you." He nodded and walked away. The quiet hum of the lobby slowly returned. I picked up my coffee cup. The coffee had gone cold, but for the first time in a long time I felt a warmth spreading through my entire being. It was the warmth of self-respect. The public humiliation at the hotel was a battle of emotion, and they had lost spectacularly. But the next move in this chess game was not mine to make. It was my lawyer's. And her weapon of choice was not a loud voice, but a quiet, heavy piece of paper. I knew from my conversations with Ms. Reed that it would arrive the following day, and I knew it would be far more devastating than a canceled vacation. Back in their cold, silent house, Brianna and Todd were living in a state of suspended terror. The money was gone, but they had not yet grasped the full scope of their predicament. They were like spoiled children who had been put in a timeout, still believing that if they just waited long enough, the punishment would end and things would go back to normal. They were wrong. The punishment had not even truly begun. The doorbell rang in the late afternoon. It was not a friendly chime. It was a sharp, insistent buzz that cut through the tense silence of the house. Todd answered it. Standing on their pristine doorstep was a courier holding a crisp, cream-colored envelope and a digital scanner. "Signature required for Brianna Covington," the courier said, his voice devoid of emotion. Todd signed, and the man handed him the envelope before turning and walking away. It felt heavy in Todd's hand, unnaturally so. On the top left corner, embossed in elegant, severe lettering, were the words, "Reed and Associates Attorneys at Law." He carried it into the living room as if it were a venomous snake. He handed it to Brianna, who was sitting on the sofa staring blankly at a dark television screen. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she tore open the seal. Inside was a single thick sheet of paper covered in dense black type. I can picture her as she began to read. Her eyes would have scanned the first paragraph, her brow furrowed in confusion. It was a formal introduction stating that the law firm of Reed and Associates now represented me, Nathaniel Covington, in all matters pertaining to the Covington Family Trust. It established a wall between us, a professional barrier she could no longer cross with tears or screams. The second paragraph was a blow. It stated in cold, unambiguous language that her authority as trustee had been suspended effective immediately due to a suspected breach of fiduciary duty. I had asked Ms. Reed to define that term for me. Fiduciary duty. It was, she explained, a sacred legal obligation, a duty to act with unwavering loyalty and care for the financial well-being of another. The letter was not just accusing her of being a bad daughter, it was accusing her of being a criminal. But the third paragraph was the hammer. It was the one designed not just to inform, but to terrify. It was a formal legal demand. It stated that in accordance with the law, she was now required to provide a complete and total accounting of every single transaction, every withdrawal, and every expenditure from the trust's accounts for the entirety of the past 2 years. The letter demanded original receipts, invoices, and a written justification for any expense over $100. It gave them a deadline. 30 days. The final paragraph was the threat wrapped in the polite language of the law. It explained that failure to provide a complete and satisfactory accounting within the allotted 30 days would result in immediate legal action. It mentioned 2 specific consequences. First, a full forensic audit conducted by an independent firm, and second, a civil lawsuit seeking the recovery of any and all misappropriated funds plus punitive damages interest and all associated legal fees. The paper would have slipped from Brianna's fingers, fluttering to the expensive rug. The color would have drained from her face. This was a nightmare from which she could not wake up. Losing the money was one thing. That was a lifestyle problem. This was a life problem, an audit, a lawsuit. This was about having her entire life, her lies, her secrets meticulously dissected by strangers under the cold, bright light of the law. It was about public record, about disgrace. "Todd," she would have whispered, her voice a choked, strangled sound. "Read this." He would have picked up the letter, his own bravado vanishing as he scanned the words. "Forensic audit." He'd say the words catching in his throat. "Brianna, do you know what that means? They don't just look at the big stuff, they look at everything. Every dinner, every golf game, every investment." The fear in his eyes would have been pure and absolute, because he knew better than anyone where the real bodies were buried. He knew about the can't-miss tech startup he had sunk $50,000 into that went bankrupt 6 months later. He knew about the personal debts he had paid off using trust funds. They were trapped. If they produced the documents, they would be admitting their guilt. They would be handing my lawyer the very evidence she needed to destroy them. If they refused, they would be sued into oblivion. The canceled vacation was a punishment. This letter was a cage. My daughter and her husband, who had tried to put me in a basement, were now in a prison of their own making, and the walls were made of paper covered in the inescapable language of the truth. They had no way out. The legal letter was not a bomb. It was a slow-acting poison seeping into the foundations of their marriage, turning their fear into a toxic sludge of accusation and blame. I did not know it at the time, but the pressure cooker inside their house was about to explode. The careful facade of the perfect, successful couple was about to be torn apart, not by me, but by the weight of their own greed. And their son, my grandson, would be there to witness it all. The argument, as I later learned, began after a long, terrifying silence. They had read the letter. They had understood its implications. And they had sat there for nearly an hour, trapped in a state of mutual dread. It was Brianna who finally broke. Her voice when she spoke was no longer angry. It was brittle, thin, and laced with a terror I had never heard from her before. "What have you done, Todd?" she whispered, the letter still clutched in her hand. "A forensic audit. They're going to look at everything. Everything." Todd, who had been staring at the floor, looked up. His usual smug confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal look. "What do you mean, what have I done?" he snapped. "What have we done? You were the one spending thousands on clothes and spa days. You didn't seem to mind then." "That's not what they're going to care about," she shot back, her voice rising. "They're going to care about the big things, the things you were so secretive about, the money you kept moving around. I asked you about it, and you told me not to worry, that you were making it grow. Where is it, Todd? Where is the money you were growing?" He stood up and began to pace, running his hands through his hair. "It's an investment. It takes time. You can't just pull money out of these things." "What investment?" she pressed, standing up to face him. "You never told me what it was. You just said it was a sure thing. My father's money, Todd. You took my father's money and you gambled it away, didn't you?" "I did not gamble it," he roared, his face turning red. "I was trying to build us a real future, a future where we didn't have to depend on your father's handouts. I was trying to make us our own fortune." And then the confession came tumbling out in a torrent of self-pity and excuses. He told her about the tech startup, a company called Innovate Futures, that had promised to revolutionize the energy market. A friend of his had sworn it was the next big thing. Todd had sunk $50,000 of the trust's money into it. He told Brianna how he had planned to triple the investment, pay back the trust, and keep the profits for themselves. No one would have ever known. "So where is it?" Brianna asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Where is our triple profit?" Todd couldn't meet her eyes. "There were complications," he mumbled. "The market shifted. The company, it went under. The money is gone, Brianna." "Gone." She repeated the word, a hollow echo in the vast, silent room. $50,000 is gone. It was a calculated risk. "Tara," he insisted, his voice pleading now. "No," she said, her voice shaking with a rage that was terrifying to behold. "It was theft. You stole from my father. You stole from me. And now because of you, we are going to be sued. We are going to lose everything. All because you had to play the big shot." The argument raged on a hurricane of blame and recrimination. They threw every mistake, every extravagance, every lie they had ever told each other into the storm. Their words were ugly and cruel, the sound of two people tearing each other apart to see who would be left with less of the blame. And upstairs in the quiet of his room, Leo heard everything. The shouting had drawn him out into the hallway. He sat at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, listening to the complete and utter destruction of his world. He heard about the lost money. He heard the venom in their voices as they spoke about his grandfather, not as a person, but as a resource they had exhausted. He heard the raw, selfish fear that had replaced any semblance of love or partnership between his parents. The image he had of them, of the strong, successful couple, shattered into a million pieces. He saw them for what they were, scared, greedy children who had been caught. He crept back to his room, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a profound sense of shame, but also a fierce protective loyalty to the one person in this whole mess who had acted with dignity: his grandfather. He sat on his bed, the angry shouts still echoing from downstairs. He felt a tear slide down his cheek. He was scared. But underneath the fear there was a flicker of something else: resolve. The same resolve that had taken root in my own heart just 2 nights before. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over my contact name. He hesitated for only a second. Then his fingers moved quickly across the screen. He typed a short, simple message, a digital flare sent up from a sinking ship. A message that would change the entire course of this war. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my hotel room, my phone lit up. I looked down and saw a text from a number I knew by heart. It was from Leo. It read, "Grandpa. Are you okay? I heard them fighting. I know what they did with the money. I'm on your side." I stared at the words on the screen, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with anger or justice. It was hope. I was no longer alone in this fight. I had an ally. And my daughter and her husband had no idea that their greatest secret was no longer safe. The day of the meeting arrived. It had been 3 weeks since the legal letter was delivered. 3 weeks of complete and total silence from my daughter and her husband. I knew, however, that this was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of frantic phone calls to banks of sleepless nights, staring at spreadsheets of 2 people realizing that the walls of their comfortable world were closing in on them. And now their time was up. I arrived at Ms. Reed's office a half an hour early. She and I met in her personal office first, going over the final plan. She was, as always, the picture of calm professionalism. I, too, felt a sense of profound peace. The anger had cooled into a solid, unshakable resolve. There was no more turmoil in my heart. There was only the quiet determination to see this through to its logical conclusion. We walked into the main conference room together. It was a large, imposing space dominated by a long, dark wood table that reflected the city's skyline like a black mirror. We took our seats on one side of the table, a stack of documents sitting neatly in front of Ms. Reed. We were a united front. Brianna and Todd arrived precisely on time. The moment they walked in, I could see the strategy they had decided upon. The angry, entitled people who had screamed at me in the hotel lobby were gone. In their place were 2 somber, humbled characters in a play of their own devising. Brianna was wearing a conservative gray dress, her hair pulled back neatly. Todd was in a simple dark suit, his usual flashy watch noticeably absent. They looked like they were attending a funeral. In a way, I suppose they were. They sat down opposite us, the vast expanse of the polished table feeling like a courtroom. They avoided looking at Ms. Reed, their eyes fixed solely on me. It was Brianna who broke the heavy silence. She leaned forward, her hands clasped together on the table, and summoned a tear to her eye. It was a masterful performance. "Dad," she began, her voice thick with rehearsed emotion. "First of all, I just want to say how deeply, deeply sorry I am. For everything." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "We were wrong. I was wrong. I was stressed and I wasn't thinking, and I said horrible, unforgivable things. Things I never meant. We miss you in the house. It's so empty and quiet without you. Leo misses you terribly." She glanced at Todd, who nodded on cue, his face a mask of solemn regret. "We made a terrible mistake, Nate," he said, his voice low and earnest. "We took you for granted. We were blinded by the pressures of life. But we're ready to make it right. Anything you want. We just want our family back. We want you back." It was a good speech. It was full of all the right words. Sorry, mistake, family. It was designed to pull at the heartstrings of a lonely old father to make him forget the legal documents and remember only the sentimental bond that they had long since shattered. 2 years ago, it would have worked. I would have caved instantly, desperate for any scrap of affection. But I was not that man anymore. I sat there, my face calm, my hands resting in my lap. I did not react. I did not nod. I did not offer a single word of forgiveness. I simply let her performance hang in the air, the empty words echoing in the silent, unforgiving room. When it became clear I was not going to respond, a flicker of panic appeared in Brianna's eyes. Her performance was failing. She had misjudged her audience. It was Ms. Reed who finally spoke. She had been listening patiently, her expression unreadable. She did not look at Brianna with anger or sympathy. She looked at her as a scientist might look at a specimen. "Thank you for your sentiments, Mrs. Thompson," Ms. Reed said, her voice crisp and professional, cutting through the thick emotional fog Brianna had tried to create. "However, we are not here today to discuss feelings. We are here because the 30-day deadline has passed. We are here to receive your official response to our formal request for a full financial accounting of the Covington Family Trust." The shift in tone was immediate and brutal. The play was over. The warmth vanished from the room, replaced by the cold, hard reality of the law. Brianna and Todd both recoiled as if they had been slapped. Their carefully constructed facade of remorse crumbled instantly, revealing the raw, undisguised fear beneath. The time for apologies and crocodile tears was over. It was time to face the numbers. Ms. Reed let the silence in the room hang for a moment, then she slid a thin folder across the table towards them. "This," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "is the accounting you sent over yesterday. It is, to put it mildly, incomplete. It is a work of fiction. You've listed thousands of dollars under vague categories like household expenses and family maintenance. You have provided almost no receipts for any significant expenditure." She paused, her eyes locking onto Todd. "For instance, you've omitted a rather significant $50,000 wire transfer made last year to an entity called Innovate Futures LLC, an entity which our research shows declared bankruptcy 6 months ago. We also have a credible witness who is prepared to testify that this transfer was made without the primary beneficiary's knowledge or consent, and that you knowingly misrepresented it as a secure investment." The last bit of color drained from Todd's face. He looked at Brianna with wide, terrified eyes. A witness. They both knew immediately who it was. Leo. Their own son had betrayed them. The final wall of their defense had just been turned to dust. They were completely, utterly exposed. Ms. Reed continued, her voice relentless. "So here are your options. You can cooperate with us to determine the full extent of the misappropriated funds, in which case my client may be willing to handle this as a civil matter to recover what is owed. Or you can continue to obstruct, in which case we will proceed with a lawsuit that includes charges of fraud and embezzlement. Given the evidence we already have, I am confident that the district attorney would take a keen interest in such a case. The choice is yours." The room was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the city traffic 14 floors below. The threat of criminal charges of jail time hung in the air. Brianna. Her face a mess of real tears, now turned to me. Her performance was over, replaced by a raw animal desperation. "Dad, please," she begged, her voice a ragged whisper. "Please don't do this. We made a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. We'll pay it back. I swear. We'll sell the house. We'll sell the cars. We'll work for the rest of our lives to pay it back. Please, don't send us to jail. Don't destroy your family." I looked at my daughter, and for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just a vast, quiet emptiness where my love for her used to be. I took a slow breath, and finally I spoke. "Family," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You use that word, but I don't think you know what it means. Family is not about blood. It is about respect. It is about loyalty. It is about protecting each other, not preying on each other. Family is what I had with your mother, Amelia. We built a life, a legacy based on those values. A legacy you and your husband have spent the last 2 years systematically dismantling for your own selfish pleasure." I leaned forward slightly, making sure I held her gaze. "You are right about one thing, Brianna. I will not destroy my family's legacy. I am going to save it. I am going to restore it to what it was always meant to be. That is why I am not going to sue you. I am not interested in revenge or seeing you in jail." A flicker of desperate, unbelievable hope lit up in their eyes. They thought they had won. They thought my fatherly love had finally triumphed over my anger. They were wrong. Instead, I continued, my voice as solid as bedrock. "As is my right as the sole grantor of the trust, I have signed the documents to have the Covington Family Trust dissolved effective immediately. All remaining assets will be liquidated." The hope in their eyes died instantly, replaced by sheer, uncomprehending shock. "The entirety of the funds," I said, letting each word land with its full devastating weight. "Every last penny that you failed to steal will be used to establish a new charitable foundation. It will be called the Amelia Covington Foundation." I let that sink in for a moment before delivering the final crushing blow. Its mission will be simple. It will be dedicated to providing safe, dignified housing and financial support for elderly individuals who have been financially abused, abandoned, or mistreated by their own families. The very legacy you tried to turn into sports cars and vacations will now be used to help the victims of people exactly like you. Amelia's name will not be associated with your greed. It will be a symbol of hope for the very people you see as burdens. The reaction was not loud. It was a terrible, profound silence. Brianna made a small, choking sound as if the air had been stolen from her lungs. Todd just stared, his mouth slightly open, his face a blank mask of utter devastation. This was a fate worse than a lawsuit. A lawsuit was about money. This was about their souls. I hadn't just taken their inheritance away. I had transformed it into a permanent public monument to their cruelty, a legacy of their shame that would do good in the world for years to come, long after they were gone. I had taken their ugliest secret and turned it into my life's beautiful, final purpose. 6 months have passed since that day in the conference room. I did not see Brianna or Todd again, but my life is not defined by their absence. It is defined by what I am building now. I stand on a patch of earth, the air thick with the smell of fresh-cut lumber and possibility. In front of me, the wooden frame of a new building rises against the blue sky. It is the first housing complex of the Amelia Covington Foundation. I am wearing a hard hat, and in my hands I hold a blueprint, its pages filled with the familiar language of support beams and foundations. A young man stands beside me, his own hard hat slightly askew. It is my grandson, Leo. He spends every Saturday here with me, learning the trade, absorbing the values of creating something real and lasting. He points to a section of the plan. "Is that going to be strong enough, Grandpa?" I look from the paper to the structure taking shape, then to the fine, honest young man beside me. I place my hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Leo," I say, and my voice is full of a peace I thought I had lost forever. "This foundation is the strongest I have ever built. I lost a house, but I have given a home to many. I lost a daughter, but I have gained a son. And I have learned that a true legacy is not what you leave behind in a bank account. It is what you build in the hearts of others." This whole experience taught me a profound lesson. For years, I believed my value as a father was measured by my ability to provide confusing financial support with love and allowing my own dignity to be slowly eroded for the sake of a false family peace. But true strength is not found in silent sacrifice. It is found in the moment you decide that your self-respect is not for sale. I learned that it is never too late to tear down a life built on a weak foundation and engineer a new legacy, one founded on the bedrock of integrity, purpose, and helping others. Share your own experiences in the comments below. When was a time you had to teach someone an unexpected lesson about respect?